In the heart of Ndara, a kingdom where music was breath itself, every dawn and dusk began with the echo of drums. The people believed the rhythm of those sacred instruments carried messages from the living to the dead, binding generations in a harmony that could never be broken. In the grand plazas, beneath golden skies and towering palms, the sound of the drums wove through the air like prayer, steady, powerful, and eternal. Among the drummers, one name rose like dawn above the rest: Amara. She was young, radiant, and humble, with hands that moved over the drumskins as if she were born of rhythm itself. When she played, even the wind paused to listen. Birds alighted on rooftops, elders closed their eyes, and sometimes faint whispers of the ancestors were said to drift through the air, joining the living in their song. Amara had no noble title, no royal blood, yet her gift was divine. The villagers said her drumming could heal grief and awaken courage. When warriors returned from battle, they asked her to play so that the spirits of their fallen brothers could find peace. Mothers brought their newborns to her so the rhythm of her drum could bless their first dreams. Even the king, a wise and aging ruler named Chiron, found solace in her music. Whenever he sat upon the throne and the troubles of the realm pressed upon him, he summoned Amara to play in the courtyard. The moment her hands touched the drum, the tension in his face melted away. Her rhythms did not simply entertain, they connected heaven and earth, calling upon forces far older than any crown. But where there is light, envy often casts its longest shadow. Watching from the jeweled balcony of the royal palace was Queen Zelira, whose beauty was renowned but whose heart was restless. She had once been beloved for her charm and grace, but as the years passed, her vanity deepened, and her insecurity took root like a creeping vine. Each time the king smiled at Amara's drumming, each time the people cheered her name in festivals, Zelira felt a pang of bitterness twist inside her. The music that lifted the spirits of others became poison in her veins. She began to see Amara not as a blessing to the kingdom, but as a rival, a silent thief stealing the devotion she believed belonged only to her. At night, the queen would pace through her chamber, her long robes whispering across the marble floors. The mirrors reflected her furrowed brow and burning eyes. "She plays like the gods speak through her," Zelira murmured to herself, gripping the edge of her vanity. But no mortal should command the ears of spirits. The more she watched Amara, the more convinced she became that the maiden's power was unnatural, a trick or a curse disguised as beauty. Some nights, she dreamed of drums beating from beneath her throne, deep, thunderous rhythms that spoke of betrayal and rising storms. Each morning, she woke with her heart pounding, believing the dream to be a warning. Amara, meanwhile, remained unaware of the storm gathering in the queen's heart. Her days were spent in the marketplace, surrounded by children who begged her to teach them rhythm. She treated everyone with kindness: the farmers who sold grain, the smiths who hammered blades, the widows who mourned beside the river. Though she lived humbly, her laughter carried far, and her presence seemed to bless the air around her. When she played the great drum of Ndara during the yearly festival of remembrance, her rhythms rolled like thunder across the hills. The crowd wept and danced, shouting her name to the heavens. Even the sky seemed to shimmer brighter, as though the ancestors themselves rejoiced. King Chiron, standing beside his uneasy queen, could not hide his admiration. "Her music is the voice of the old ones," he said softly, almost reverently. "Through her, our people remember who they are." His words, though innocent, struck Zelira's pride like a blade. That night, she stood alone in the throne hall after the feast, the torches burning low. Her gaze fell upon the throne itself, an ancient seat carved from obsidian and gold, said to rest above the burial ground of the first kings. The drums, kept in sacred chambers beneath the palace, were placed near that spot so the rhythm could awaken the spirits of the ancestors resting below. Zelira's lips curled into a hard smile. "If the drums carry the voices of the dead," she whispered, "then let them carry silence too." Thus, beneath the surface of the kingdom's joy, envy began to fester. Whispers of superstition and jealousy started to circulate, planted subtly by the queen's tongue. "The maiden's rhythms are too strong," she told the court priests. "Do they summon the ancestors, or command them?" Some began to look upon Amara with uncertainty, questioning what power truly flowed through her hands. Still, Amara continued to drum, pure-hearted and fearless, unaware that the very music connecting her to the ancestors was now painting a target upon her. The drums of Ndara beat on, echoing across the plains and through the hearts of every soul. Yet somewhere deep within the mountain drums, the ancestors stirred uneasily. They felt the approaching discord, a storm not of nature but of envy. And among them one spirit, a queen long buried, whispered to the wind, The rhythm that brings life shall also awaken death, if jealousy rules the heart. As days turned into weeks, Queen Zalaira's unease grew into something sharper, heavier, an invisible weight that pressed against her chest whenever Amara's name was spoken. In the palace courtyard, servants hummed the rhythms of Amara's latest song. In the streets, children drummed on pots, chanting her name with laughter. Even the king seemed to smile more often when Amara was near, his eyes soft with admiration and peace. What had once been the queen's kingdom of grace and authority now seemed to hum to the rhythm of another woman's hands. Each night, Zalaira sat alone in her chamber, the torches flickering across her jeweled mirrors. Their reflections multiplied her face into dozens of cold, watchful eyes. "They forget who I am," she muttered, her voice trembling with anger. "They call her the Blessed One, the chosen of the ancestors, but I am the queen. I am the heart of this throne." She would stare toward the balcony where the faint sound of drums drifted through the night. The rhythm was soft but unyielding, echoing through the marble walls like a heartbeat that refused to die. Servants began whispering among themselves, spreading quiet tales that the ancestors smiled upon Amara's music more than they did the queen's reign. Some said the spirits danced when Amara played. Others swore that the royal gardens bloomed faster when her rhythms filled the air. When Zalaira walked through the corridors, she noticed the way people lowered their eyes too quickly, afraid to meet her gaze. She felt the warmth of the people's love shifting away from her, trickling toward the young maiden like sunlight turning from shadow. And deep within her, fear began to rot into fury. One evening, during a royal banquet, the king praised Amara before the court. "Her hands are blessed," he said, lifting his cup. "Through her, the ancestors have returned their favor to us." The hall erupted in cheers, but Zalaira's grip tightened around her goblet until wine spilled down her fingers. The drums played in celebration, but in her mind they became mocking. Each beat a reminder that her place was slipping away, that her crown grew heavier as the people's hearts drifted elsewhere. That night, unable to sleep, Zalaira left her chamber and wandered the dark halls of the palace. Her bare feet touched the cold stone, and the whispers of distant drums followed her, faint yet relentless. She found herself descending the spiral staircase to the lowest halls, where the air was damp and the ancient drums of the ancestors were stored. There shadows clung to the walls like thick smoke. The torches burned low, casting her figure in trembling light. "If the spirits favor her," Zalaira hissed, "then perhaps I must speak to spirits who favor me." In the following days she began asking strange questions of the court priests, questions they refused to answer. She asked about the boundaries between life and death, about spirits that fed on envy, and about how one might silence a soul bound to the rhythm of the earth. The priests crossed themselves in fear and warned her not to stray into darkness. But Zalaira's fear had already curdled into desperation. Then, one moonless night, a cloaked figure appeared at the edge of the forest near the palace gates, a man whose face was hidden beneath the skull of a jackal. He was known only in whispers, the shadow worker, a sorcerer who dealt in forgotten bargains. They said he could bend spirits, twist fate, and summon silence where music once lived. Zalaira sent for him in secret. When they met in her chamber, the air grew colder. The sorcerer bowed low, his voice rasping like dry reeds. "You seek to silence what should never be silenced, my queen," he murmured. "The girl's rhythm binds her to the ancestors. To harm her is to awaken them." Zalaira's eyes burned with the reflection of the candles. "Then let them awaken," she said. "But let them listen to me instead." The sorcerer smiled, a thin, knowing smile. "That power has a price," he warned. "The drums that sing for her may one day drum for you, or against you." But Zalaira did not flinch. She had already made her choice. Fear had become her compass and jealousy her only truth. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying faint echoes from the village below. Amara was playing again, her rhythm soft and alive. The sound reached even the palace walls, and for a moment, Zalaira closed her eyes. The music was beautiful, achingly beautiful, and that, more than anything, terrified her. The palace shimmered that night under 1,000 golden torches, their flames bending with the rhythm of royal drums. Word spread quickly through Ndara that Queen Zalaira herself had arranged a grand feast in honor of Amara, the beloved maiden of the drums. The villagers whispered in wonder, some in hope, others in suspicion. Could it be that the queen had finally accepted the girl whose rhythms carried the voices of the ancestors? Or was this another one of the palace's silken traps, hidden behind honeyed smiles and polished words? Amara, humble as always, hesitated when the royal summons came. The queen's messenger bowed low, his expression unreadable. "Her Majesty wishes to honor you before the people," he said, his tone flat, almost rehearsed. She has prepared a banquet to celebrate the harmony your drums have brought to the kingdom. Though Amara's heart fluttered with uncertainty, she chose to believe in goodwill. If the queen seeks peace, she whispered to herself, then peace I will bring. When she entered the grand hall that evening, the air glowed with opulence. Silk curtains, carved ivory pillars, and long tables heavy with roasted meats and fruit-laden platters. The court musicians played softly, but their rhythm was lifeless, missing the heartbeat of the drums that usually guided them. The courtiers bowed as Amara stepped forward, their eyes glimmering with curiosity and envy. The queen sat on her throne, her smile wide and dazzling, but her gaze was cold, sharp as a blade hidden beneath velvet. "Come, child," Zelira said sweetly, gesturing to the seat beside her. "You have brought our kingdom honor. Tonight, you dine as one of the royal family." Her voice was honey, but something in the way it lingered on the word child made Amara's stomach twist. Still, she bowed and took her place. The king watched quietly, his expression clouded with fatigue, perhaps unaware of the tension rippling beneath the golden surface of celebration. Servants poured deep red wine into crystal goblets, the liquid gleaming like molten rubies. Zelira raised her cup, her smile unwavering. "To the girl who makes the ancestors dance," she declared. "May her spirit remain forever in tune with the drums." Laughter and cheers followed, echoing through the hall. Amara lifted her cup, her reflection trembling in the dark surface of the wine. The queen's eyes met hers across the rim, and for a fleeting moment, Amara felt the faint pull of warning deep in her chest, the same instinct that guided her rhythms. But she silenced it with faith and took a sip. The taste was bitter, masked by sweetness. The room around her blurred slightly, the laughter stretching into echoes. She felt the weight of the drums far away, as though their beat had moved beyond her reach. The queen leaned closer, her voice low and smooth. "You have a gift, my dear. Even the gods listen. But tell me," she paused, her words dripping with venom disguised as grace. "Do you think they will still hear you when your heart no longer beats?" Amara's fingers trembled as the goblet slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. Gasps rippled through the hall. Her vision swam, faces blurring into shadows. The queen feigned alarm, rising swiftly. "Fetch help. The maiden is unwell," she cried, her voice echoing with false concern. But no one moved fast enough. The spell of deceit had already taken hold. Amara's last sight before her eyes closed was the flicker of torchlight against the queen's jeweled crown, glinting like firelight reflected in still water. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, a faint drumbeat began, soft, distant, but alive. As darkness folded over her, she heard its rhythm calling her name, as if the ancestors themselves were stirring, ready to answer the betrayal that had silenced their chosen voice. Under the veil of midnight, when the revelers had long departed and the palace corridors stood still, Queen Zelira's true plan unfolded. The great hall that had once echoed with laughter and clinking goblets now lay shrouded in shadow, the scent of poisoned wine lingering like a ghost. Amara's body, delicate and still, rested upon a silken shroud embroidered with the kingdom's crest, a mockery of honor masking betrayal. The queen stood over her with cold satisfaction, her jeweled fingers twitching as if brushing away the last traces of guilt. "Take her below," Zelira commanded, her voice sharp as breaking glass. "No grave, no song. The people must believe she vanished by fate's hand, not mine." Her guards hesitated. Even the bravest among them felt unease at handling the maiden whose drums had once called the ancestors. But the queen's glare burned through their hesitation. With bowed heads, they lifted Amara's lifeless form and carried her through a hidden passage that led beneath the throne room, a place older than the kingdom itself. The passage smelled of damp earth and forgotten magic. Faded carvings lined the walls, faces of old kings, symbols of protection, runes that warned against burying innocence beneath pride. The torches flickered weakly as if resisting the act they were forced to illuminate. When they reached the hollow beneath the throne, Zelira raised her hand, halting the men. "Here," she said. "Let her rest where power sits. Her spirit will fuel my reign." The guards obeyed, laying the body upon a slab of dark stone. The queen drew forth a vial given by the sorcerer, thick black liquid glinting like oil. She poured it in a circle around Amara, chanting the words he had taught her. "Let her voice bind to stone, her spirit to silence, her gift to my crown." The air thickened, the temperature dropped, and the torches dimmed as if suffocated. The queen smiled grimly, believing she had trapped Amara's soul beneath her feet, chained forever to her rule. When the slab was sealed and the chamber covered in layers of stone, Zelira ascended the steps to her throne. The marble floor gleamed as if untouched by sin, yet a faint pulse seemed to hum beneath it, a whisper too low for mortal ears. The queen settled into her seat, exhaling triumph. "Let the people sing of their vanished saint," she murmured, "and let their voices rise to me. But the earth does not forget." Deep below, the silence was not empty, it was listening. The stone that encased Amara began to hum with a strange resonance. Her fingers twitched slightly, though her body lay still. The threads of the drumbeat she had once played stirred faintly within the soil, echoing through the chamber walls. The spirits that had always lingered near her, the ancestors who had danced to her rhythms, felt the disturbance. They gathered like wind in the dark, murmuring, "She is not gone. She only sleeps." Above, the queen shifted uneasily on her throne. The air felt heavy, the marble cold against her feet. She waved her hand dismissively, yet her eyes darted to the shadows. Somewhere in the stillness, she thought she heard a faint, distant sound, a slow, measured beat as though someone far away tapped softly on hollow wood. That night, the moonlight did not touch the palace walls. Even the stars seemed to turn their gaze. Beneath the throne, the earth whispered to itself, remembering the injustice carved into its heart. Roots trembled. Dust shifted. The drums of the ancestors stirred faintly in their sleep, their rhythm ancient and patient. The queen slept soundly for the first few hours, but as dawn approached, her dreams were filled with echoes, a heartbeat she could not silence, a rhythm that grew louder each night, rising from the very stones that bore her throne. In the silent hours of the night, when the torches in the palace dimmed and the halls of Ndara slept, a sound began to rise from beneath the queen's golden throne. At first, it was no louder than a heartbeat, a soft pulse, deep and distant, like rain tapping on a hollow gourd. Zelira, restless and haunted by her own thoughts, lifted her head from her pillows, certain she had imagined it. Yet, when she strained her ears, she heard it again, a slow, deliberate rhythm that echoed through the stones beneath her chambers. At dawn, she dismissed it as wind or memory. But as the nights passed, the sound returned, growing clearer, steadier. The rhythm began to form a pattern as though fingers, unseen and unbound, were striking the sacred beat of the ancestors. The same beat Amara once played during harvest festivals, when the people danced in joy and the spirits of the dead blessed the land with rain. The queen's breath grew shallow. It couldn't be. Amara was gone, buried in silence beneath her very feet. The servants were the first to whisper. They claimed to hear singing with the drums, a low hum like the sigh of souls remembering their pain. Some swore they felt the floors trembling as though something beneath sought to rise. Pots fell, mirrors cracked, and the palace cats refused to enter the throne room. Every night the sound became louder, more alive. It was no longer the echo of memory, it was music returning to life. Zelira called the palace guards, demanding they search for intruders or tricksters. But when the soldiers knelt beside the throne, they too heard it, the hollow thunder of drums beating from below. Their eyes widened in terror and one dropped his spear. None dared touch the ground again. The queen struck her scepter against the marble, shouting for silence, but the rhythm only grew faster, mocking her authority. It was as if the earth itself had chosen a new voice to obey. That night, Zelira sat alone in her chamber, surrounded by candles. The flames flickered wildly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. She tried to pray, but the words felt heavy, meaningless. Every time her lips moved, the drums seemed to answer, their tones shifting between sorrow and fury. Then, between beats, a whisper rose, faint but unmistakable. "Zelira." The queen froze. The whisper came again, softer, weaving through the rhythm like smoke. "You took my voice but not my spirit." The candles blew out, plunging her into darkness. The drums grew louder, filling every corner of the palace. The throne above the buried chamber trembled. From within the walls came a strange vibration, and faintly, ever so faintly, the sound of fingernails tapping on stone. The palace awoke in chaos. Servants screamed and fled through the halls. The royal guard stood paralyzed, their spears quivering in their hands. Some fell to their knees, believing the ancestors had returned in wrath. The rhythm now matched a heartbeat, quick, furious, unstoppable. By dawn, the queen had locked herself in her chamber, covering her ears, whispering prayers that no longer held power. But the drums did not stop. They followed her every breath, every heartbeat, every lie she had ever told. The spirits had begun to stir beneath the throne of Ndara, and their song, the song of the dead, had only just begun. The sound of the drums spread beyond the palace walls, rolling through the hills like distant thunder. At first, the villagers thought it was the coming of rain, the long-awaited voice of the heavens promising renewal. But as the rhythm deepened, steady and mournful, they began to realize it was not the sky that spoke. It was the earth. The drums of Ndara had awakened, and their song carried the weight of the dead. Farmers awoke in the night, sweating and trembling, their dreams filled with the same haunting rhythm. In their visions they saw Amara, her eyes glowing like fireflies beneath layers of soil, her hands moving across invisible drums that pulsed with light. Children cried out, saying the maiden was calling them to listen, that her heart was not at rest. The elders gathered beneath the great baobab tree, frightened, for they knew the ancient warning. When the drums beat without hands, the ancestors rise to demand truth. In the palace, Queen Zalira's torment deepened. Every corridor of marble now echoed with the sound of drumming, low, powerful, and unrelenting. She covered her ears, yet the rhythm beat within her skull. Her guards fled, her servants refused to enter the throne room. Even the royal dogs whimpered and clawed at the doors to escape. Each beat shook the foundations of the palace as though the buried chamber beneath her seat was pushing upward, straining to breathe. The priests of Ndara were summoned, robed in white and trembling. They brought incense, chants, and sacred water to calm the spirits, but the smoke swirled downward, not upward, as if being drawn back into the ground. The head priest, his voice cracking with fear, spoke to the queen, "Your Majesty, the ancestors are awake. Someone buried unjustly stirs among them." Zalira's hands tightened on her scepter until her knuckles turned pale. "Silence," she shouted. But even her command was drowned by the thunder below her throne. Beyond the palace, the people began to gather in the square. They could hear the drums as clearly as their own hearts, the rhythm pulsing through the soil beneath their feet. The women covered their heads in fear, the men stood still with wide eyes, and the children pressed their ears to the ground. "She's calling," one old woman whispered. "The maiden who drummed for the ancestors. She is not gone." That night, the moon rose red, heavy and full, and the river that ran through Ndara shimmered like blood. Mist drifted through the fields and strange lights flickered between the trees. The air itself seemed to breathe. Then came the voices, soft at first like the sighing of the wind, but soon forming a chorus of whispers. They were the voices of those long dead, humming in time with the drums. In the royal cemetery, stones cracked. Old tombs trembled. A child who had been keeping watch screamed as he saw shadows rising, not of flesh but of memory and spirit. They took no shape, yet their presence filled the night. The queen watched from her balcony, her heart pounding faster than the drums. She felt the cold air of the ancestors sweep through her palace, carrying with it the scent of dust, rain, and vengeance. From beneath the floorboards, a voice rose between the drumbeats, Amara's voice, gentle yet unbreakable. "Queen of envy," it whispered, "you buried me beneath your pride. But you cannot bury the truth." The drums struck once more, loud enough to shake the mountain. The people fell to their knees. The dead had begun to march toward dawn, and Ndara would never sleep again. Night after night, Queen Zalira's sleep became a battlefield. The once velvet cushions of her chamber felt like shards of stone beneath her. No matter how she turned or tossed, the drums persisted, pounding through the floor, echoing through the walls, vibrating inside her very bones. Each beat carried the weight of centuries, the judgment of ancestors, and the fury of a daughter wronged. Zalira awoke gasping, drenched in sweat, convinced that the sound was not coming from beneath the palace but from within herself. Her dreams were no refuge. In them she saw Amara's eyes, glowing like molten silver, staring at her from the shadows. The maiden's lips moved, yet no sound came, only the echo of the drums, each beat a hammer striking her pride, her envy, and her cruelty. The walls of the palace seemed alive, bending and twisting into forms that whispered accusations. Portraits of her ancestors appeared to leer, their faces contorted in silent condemnation. Even her own reflection in the mirrors of the chambers shifted. She barely recognized the woman she once was. During these nights, Zalira felt the floor beneath her throne pulse as if alive, moving with intent. Every time she attempted to sit, the unseen drums shook the ground, and her scepter rattled in her hands. She would clutch it desperately, willing it to shield her, but the rhythmic pounding overwhelmed all else. Sometimes she could swear she heard Amara's voice intertwining with the beat, soft yet sharp, whispering in words both sweet and cutting, "You buried me but I rise. You silenced me but the truth speaks." Her attendants no longer dared enter the chamber. Servants whispered to each other that the queen had gone mad, and many fled into the night, leaving candles unlit and doors unguarded. Alone in the dark, Zelira felt the weight of guilt settle upon her chest, heavier than any jewel she had ever worn. Her once proud beauty faded with every drumbeat, the glow of her skin dulled, her hair lost its luster, and the sharpness of her eyes softened into haunted shadows. The court physician tried remedies of herbs and oils, but nothing could touch the invisible force that tormented her, a force born of her own malice amplified by the justice of the dead. In her waking hours the queen attempted distraction. She ordered festivals, feasts and prayers to calm the spirits. But every drumbeat followed her, faint at first, then growing in intensity whenever she thought herself safe. Even the grand palace guards, stalwart and fearless, quivered under the sound, murmuring that the ancestors themselves had risen. Zelira tried to silence the music with sorcery and charms, but each spell seemed only to accelerate the rhythm, as though her efforts fed the power she sought to suppress. The whispers became more personal. Shadows stretched across her walls, forming fleeting images of Amara, smiling, drumming, unbroken. Every word spoken in those fleeting visions was a reminder of the queen's cruelty, promises she had broken, kindnesses she had stolen, life she had tried to bury. "You cannot hide from what you have done," the voices chanted. The drums remember. By the seventh night, Zelira's mind frayed under the relentless rhythm. Her palace, once a haven of gold and marble, had transformed into a cage of sound, shadow, and accusation. She could no longer discern sleep from wakefulness. Her world narrowed to the pounding of the drums, the whisper of Amara's name, and the suffocating knowledge that every heartbeat carried the judgment of the ancestors. Even as dawn approached, Zelira's torment showed no mercy. The Queen of Ndara, feared and revered, was now a prisoner, not of walls or chains but of guilt, fear, and the unstoppable, unyielding drums of the dead that heralded Amara's return. As the first hints of crimson bled across the eastern sky, an unnatural stillness gripped the palace of Ndara. The usual sounds of roosters and morning chatter were swallowed by a heavier, more ominous rhythm, the drums of the dead resonating from deep beneath the throne. At first, the royal guards thought it a trick of their ears, a warning bell from the earth itself. But the beat persisted, steady, unrelenting, as if the ancestors had risen to reclaim what had been taken from them. The palace trembled with each strike. Stone tiles cracked under the pressure, dust fell from the ceilings, and the gilded walls shivered as though shivering with fear. The guards, stalwart and disciplined, exchanged anxious glances, gripping their spears with white-knuckled hands. They could feel a presence, unseen yet heavy, carrying the weight of generations wronged. Every drumbeat seemed to echo in their bones, shaking courage from their hearts. From the throne room, Queen Zelira could see the floor beneath her throne beginning to fissure, long, jagged cracks opening like mouths eager to speak. The golden inlays of the throne itself rattled, threatening to topple under the invisible force. She clutched the armrests, pale and trembling, as the rhythmic pounding grew louder, each beat resonating like a command from the ancestors themselves. The chamber vibrated, sending her jeweled crown skidding across the marble, and for the first time, the queen felt the depth of her own vulnerability. Beneath the cracked stone, faint wisps of light emerged, glowing like embers in the early dawn. The sealed chamber where Amara had been entombed seemed to pulse with life, responding to the rhythm of the drums. Invisible hands seemed to lift the air, carrying the weight of the ancestors' march. Their presence was immense, a force of nature that no spell or charm could resist. The guards felt it pressing against them, an invisible wave of judgment, as though centuries of injustice were seeking recompense in that very moment. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of earth and incense, and shadows elongated unnaturally along the walls. Each drumbeat drew forth visions, glimpses of Amara, serene yet powerful, her eyes glowing like molten silver beneath the earth, her hands moving in a silent rhythm that commanded the ancestors' loyalty. The queen could hear whispers curling through the chamber, names, warnings, echoes of promises broken. Then, as if the mountain of sound could no longer be contained, the cracks beneath the throne widened further. The chamber revealed itself, dark and mysterious, but alive with a pulsing energy. Dust and shards of stone floated upward, circling as though in response to the unseen orchestra of the dead. The ancestors' march was palpable now, their presence undeniable, and the palace, once a symbol of royal dominion, had become a conduit for a power far greater than any living ruler. By the time the first rays of sunlight threatened to pierce the crimson horizon, the chamber beneath the throne had fully revealed itself. The drums continued, louder and clearer than ever, announcing that the dead had not forgotten. Amara, though still hidden, had called forth their voices, her presence felt in every vibration of the palace floor, every quiver of the air and every trembling heart in the room. The night of the dead had come and nothing, not gold, not power, nor fear, could silence the ancestors' drums. From the cracked, trembling earth beneath the throne, a light began to glow, faint at first, then growing brighter, warmer, and alive with a fierce, unyielding energy. Amara emerged from the hidden chamber, her skin radiant with an inner fire, her hair glistening as though threaded with molten silver. In her hands rested her sacred drum, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed older than time itself. Each strike she made awakened the spirits who had long slumbered, their presence now bound to her will, ready to reclaim justice for the betrayal she had endured. The palace trembled with each beat. Stone walls vibrated, ceilings quivered, and the golden ornaments on the throne rattled as the sound of the drums echoed like a call from the heavens. Servants and guards froze, eyes wide with awe and terror, sensing that the young maiden before them was no longer merely human. Her gaze, steady and unflinching, held the power of the ancestors themselves. Those who had doubted her gift now recognized the magnitude of her return, a presence unstoppable, luminous, and alive with righteous fury. Outside the palace, the rhythm spread across the kingdom. Villagers who had feared and whispered about Amara's fate now felt the vibrations in their bones. Animals paused mid-step, listening. Rivers rippled in resonance, and the wind itself seemed to carry the pulse of the drums through valleys and hills. The dead, restless no longer, marched invisibly alongside her, their invisible hands shaping the air, their spirits lending weight and authority to her every step. The queen, Zelira, watched from her trembling perch, her envy turned to paralyzing dread. Her once proud visage waned as fear consumed her. She tried to command her guards to stop what she could not understand, but each command was drowned by the ancestral rhythm. The walls shook, the floor quaked, and even her throne seemed to lean away from the unstoppable force of Amara's presence. The young maiden, though calm and measured, carried a storm within her, a storm fueled by betrayal, resilience, and the unbroken bond with the spirits of those who had been wronged before her. Amara's drums sang, each strike a declaration of justice and a call to remember the sacred laws of the ancestors. The vibrations flowed into every corner of the kingdom, reaching the ears of nobles, merchants, and villagers alike. Some fell to their knees in awe, others, gripped by guilt for their silent complicity, trembled and wept. The drums spoke not only of vengeance but of restoration, a chance to realign the kingdom with honor, respect, and reverence for the sacred traditions that had been ignored for too long. With each step, Amara's glow spread, illuminating the shadowed corners of the palace and heart alike. Her presence was a bridge between the living and the dead, a reminder that true power lies in courage, integrity, and the unbreakable connection to those who came before. By the time the first dawn touched the horizon, the kingdom had witnessed a miracle, a young maiden, wronged and hidden, rising with the strength of ages, accompanied by the eternal rhythm of the drums, singing justice into every stone, river, and sky. Amara stood before the court, radiant and unyielding, her drum cradled in her hands like a sacred scepter. The room, once filled with whispers and false admiration, now trembled under the weight of ancestral power. Every noble, every servant, every soldier felt the presence of something far greater than the walls of the palace. The spirits of the wronged, their voices carried in the unceasing rhythm of the drums. The air was thick with awe and fear, and even the sunlight seemed hesitant to enter, as if waiting for judgment to unfold. Queen Zelira, once proud and imperious, cowered on her throne, the golden ornaments glinting feebly in the muted light. Her envy had birthed cruelty, and now the consequences pressed upon her like a living force. Sweat dampened her brow, her hands shook, and her voice failed her as the drumbeats pulsed through her chest. Each reverberation was a heartbeat of truth, a rhythm of the ancestors' wrath, and it left no room for deceit or evasion. Amara lifted her drum and let it speak. The beats rolled like thunder, resonating through every stone and beam, carrying voices that had long lain silent beneath the palace. The spirits whispered through her, names, deeds, and promises broken. Every slight, every betrayal, every ounce of jealousy was recounted in echoes that danced through the chamber. The court gasped as the whispers coalesced into voices louder than any human could produce, demanding acknowledgement, accountability, and justice. Zelira tried to lift her head to meet Amara's gaze, but the truth in those glowing eyes pierced every facade. She stammered, weeping, muttering apologies that sounded hollow in the face of such divine authority. The ancestors were merciful yet firm. Their voices demanded more than words. They demanded acknowledgement, repentance, and surrender of all that was unearned. Each drumbeat seemed to push Zelira closer to the realization that power taken through envy could never remain. Then, as if the very earth had taken the verdict into its hands, the queen's throne began to crack. Splinters of gold and wood fell like rain, and smoke rose from the base where she had sat, the ancestral drums marking each fracture with a resounding note. The court shrieked in terror and awe as the crown she clutched rolled from her trembling hands. The spirits, speaking through Amara, claimed it as their own, a symbol of justice restored and a warning to all who would misuse power. Zelira fell to her knees, her tears flowing freely, powerless against the force she had sought to command but could not control. The ashes of her throne spread across the marble floor, mingling with the faint glow of Amara's drumlight. Every noble, every servant, every observer understood that the kingdom had witnessed a reckoning that transcended human judgment. The drums, their voices ceaseless and eternal, announced that justice had been done, swift, impartial and absolute. Amara, still radiant, lowered her drum, letting the final beats fade into a hushed reverence. She did not gloat, she did not revel in vengeance. She stood as the conduit for the ancestors, the embodiment of truth and courage, a living reminder that justice, when guided by honor and the spirits of the past, could not be denied. The court, the kingdom, and the queen herself had been taught a lesson in humility, respect, and the enduring power of the ancestral voice. Amara stood at the center of Ndara, her drum resting gently against her chest, the glow from its surface fading into a warm, steady light. The kingdom, once trembling under fear and envy, now breathed with a renewed rhythm. Streets that had been silent with suspicion were alive again with laughter, the chatter of children, and the harmonious cadence of daily life. Villagers moved with ease, their hearts lighter, knowing that justice had returned, not through force or fear, but through truth and the guidance of the spirits. The palace, stripped of the queen's deceitful grandeur, had transformed into a place of gathering, learning, and remembrance. Amara did not sit upon a throne, she did not command the people with edicts. Instead, she moved among them as a guardian, a mentor, and a living conduit for the ancestors. Every festival, every ceremony, and every act of communal life began with the gentle drumbeats that carried stories of courage, loyalty, and balance. The people came to understand that the drums were more than instruments, they were a bridge between the living and the dead, between the past and the present. Farmers worked their fields with renewed vigor, their hands guided by the ancestral rhythms embedded in Amara's drum. Children, who once played quietly in corners for fear of royal wrath, now danced in the village square, their movements echoing the beats that resonated through the hills. The river, which had slowed and darkened under neglect and sorrow, sparkled once more, reflecting the silver streaks of moonlight and the bright colors of blossoming trees. Nature itself seemed to respond to Amara's presence, aligning with her calm authority and the ancestral whispers she carried. Travelers came from distant lands, drawn by tales of a maiden whose drum had called the dead and reshaped a kingdom. They witnessed the living lessons etched in every street, every home, and every heart. Amara welcomed them not with pomp, but with the soft authority of one who carried the weight of generations. She showed them that strength need not be violent, that power need not oppress, and that the guidance of those who came before could heal even the deepest wounds of a people. The drums of Ndara became more than a ritual, they became a heartbeat that united the kingdom. Each dawn began with gentle taps reminding the villagers of their connection to the ancestors, and each dusk closed with slower, reflective rhythms, honoring those who had passed and the lessons they had left behind. Amara's name was spoken with reverence, not as a queen, but as a protector, a guide, and a living testament to the enduring bond between humanity and spirit. Under her watch, disputes were settled with fairness, greed and envy diminished and love flourished. Families reunited, elders shared wisdom openly, and children learned to respect both the living and the memory of the dead. The kingdom that had once been divided by fear now thrived on unity, compassion, and ancestral guidance. And as the sun set each evening, the faint echo of drums reminded all of Ndara that justice, courage, and harmony had returned, not through force, but through the voice of the one who had called upon the spirits and stood unyielding in truth.